Hello everyone, welcome to the Night-Themed Rave. I am one of your hosts, Rave and the Rave, just call me Raven. And as usual, we have Monkey.
Hello everyone, my name is Lord Monkey. I am, as per usual, very wholesome and glad to be back.
And Karma.
Welcome back everybody, I'm Eric Karma, the scuffed one of these podcasts.
And joining us tonight is our very special guest, Archlord.
Hi.
Amazing. I love it.
Best intro.
Yeah, so today we're going to be discussing Dungeons & Dragons, specifically some of the basic stuff you need to know, and lore, I guess. Honestly, we didn't have a lot of time to plan this episode, because I think multiple of us had a lot of shit on our plate this week, but that's why we have a guest, because he knows quite a bit, I assume, I hope, about D&D, and I also DM my own campaign, and I've read a lot of garbage that I kind of vaguely remember.
I watched the videos.
Raven honestly has memory mainly for D&D stuff.
Yeah, because I very much enjoy the topic, but I'll explain in a moment how that works. Arch, what is your experience with D&D?
It's just a roller coaster mostly. Or are you like, how long have I been dabbling?
Yeah, like how long, and have you ever DM'd, or are you only a player?
I've been a DM for the last 2.5 years.
Okay, and how about as a player?
Less than a month.
Okay, that's good. That's cool. Yeah, it's fine.
So is it weird going back to being a player instead of the dungeon master?
Yeah. I'm still a dungeon master for one campaign and like a and a second one. But yeah.
Yeah. I probably could have got Giraffe in here, by the way. I didn't even think about it, but it's fine. Too late. So, something I need to explain really quick for all of you who don't know Dungeons & Dragons. I'm gonna assume you know basically the concept. It's a tabletop RPG, you roll dice, and you fight monsters, and talk to NPCs, and there's silly voices, and we all, role play and all that. Cool. What you might not know is that there are different editions of Dungeons & Dragons. I'm not going to name all of them because I don't remember all of them, but there is 1 through 5, and that is the main ones, and then there is also Pathfinder, which is made by a different company, but is basically official. We are mostly going to be talking about 5th edition, which is currently the latest edition, though they have also announced 5.5, so there's that, but that's coming in, I think, 2 years. The other thing you need to know, like, right off the bat, is that there are different worlds in Dungeons & Dragons. It is not just Dungeons & Dragons. It's not Earth. It is Faerun, the Forgotten Realms, Eberron. There are these different worlds with different lore and different characters. There are some characters that are in multiple universes, like if you've seen like Doctor Strange's Multiverse of Madness, it's a multiverse basically. So there's some things that we do know and some things that we don't know, and then some things that are canon for previous editions of Dungeons & Dragons that we don't know in 5e. Archlord, just to confirm, you play 5e, right?
Oh yeah, and I'm also gonna blow your mind this entire episode. So yeah.
That's what I've been told.
Really?
Oh yeah. Everything you said was like quarter to like 1/3 of the way correct. So I'm about to blow your mind.
All right, go ahead, blow my mind then.
So we'll go with the last thing you talked about in regards to the different worlds, Eberron, and the Lost Realms being Faerun itself. The Lost Realms just referred to as the module, the campaign things like Horde of the Dragon Queen, and the other ones that come along with it. The way Dungeons & Dragons actually works in the Forgotten Realms is that there are spheres of realities. They're not. It's not technically not a real multiverse because you could physically travel between. But the aspect of it is that gods have control in these certain bubbles. So you could go to one bubble that is
Planes of existence.
Yeah. Well, planes of existence are inside a bubble. So you have like the Materia realm, the Feywilds, the Shadowfell, and then you have the Nine Hells, the Abyss, the Astral Sea, the elemental planes of fire, water, earth, and wind. So there's a whole bunch. But that's all within this singular sphere. There's a actual void somewhat between the other spheres where gods have no influence and no power. There's actual information about those kinds of places in like older editions and in some narrative text written about Dungeons and Dragons. So it's all in technically the same reality, but it's different realms and different spheres. Just think of it like a neighborhood where you have houses and each one has a lord of the house or gods of the house, and then the denizens, and it just gets smaller from there. To move beyond that towards Pathfinder isn't Dungeons and Dragons, nor is it related. The only affiliation that they have is that Pathfinder sprouted up from employees from Wizards of the Coast, which are the creators of Dungeons and Dragons, during the what was called the Spell Plague, where magic was removed from Dungeons and Dragons, and then they made Pathfinder. And then that's become a massive competitor towards Dungeons and Dragons. It's honestly more complex than 5th edition, but 5th edition was designed to get people back into Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, if you guys don't know where to start with Dungeons and Dragons, honestly, just go buy the starter set for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition and just start playing and read through the books. That's really all you need is like the original 3 books. Though, when 5.5 comes out, apparently they're going to have a new starter edition, which is going to improve on the old one. So. But yeah, no, Archlord, I kind of knew some of that stuff, but I was trying to explain it in the most simple terms I could. But thank you for correcting me.
Anything but simple,
yeah,
let's be honest.
Seriously.
That's why lore doesn't matter, which is why it's great, is because people like me who know all this stuff realize none of this means anything, because people are going to play in custom campaign settings. They're not going to be really worried about modules, because who wants to read a book to tell them what to do? Just come up with a story and go with it.
Though I will say, that is the 2 ways basically to play D&D, is either play a module or play homebrew. And holy shit, the responsibilities are big for modules, but they're way bigger for homebrew. With
I have a question
module...
for you, Archlord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said you were DM for 2.5 years?
Yeah.
I played with some of my friends before I played with Raven one time. And but so you say
Your karma, your mic cut out.
Your mic is crashing again.
he's a bit special, you could say. Be possible for someone to grab a door, put salt on it, and then hit someone with the door to do extra damage?
Wait.
Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, he's asking you if you could take a door, put soap on it, and then hit somebody with said door for extra damage.
I thought you said spikes. Salt.
Oh, salt. Okay.
I don't understand why salt would honestly, like, the door itself would be bludgeoning damage. You're not putting salt in any open wounds like a cut. I would say if you salt a blade, maybe, but, like, that's more along the lines of a sting, or would prevent proper healing via non-magical ways. It depends on your DM if they go for that.
That one. he thought that if he put and then hit someone with it, the salt would get into their wounds and do more damage.
I'll
No.
tell you this: if you've ever salted a wound on yourself, or like had let's go with a common food item in America at least, eaten French fries with open wounds on your hand, it stings, but it's not like agonizing. The idea of having damage is like the difference between being bitten by a dog and being scratched by let's just say a fingernail. Fingernail's not going to do a lot of damage, as the dog, a wolf's bite does 1d6, so anywhere from 1 damage to 6 can be severe or even less. So to think that if 1 is equivalent to like the least dangerous but still painful dog bite, I would say adding salt would not even qualify for that. Like, it might kill a pigeon.
Yeah.
I thought, but I wanted to make sure because we've been on this for a couple of years now.
And you're just gonna ask everyone who knows D&D.
So yes,
Hey,
you too.
Yeah, yes, me
fair.
too.
I mean,
yeah.
hitting somebody with a door's come up with me as a player once, where I was playing a pirate who was a captain of a ship and was trying to establish dominance after they had been marooned. And he assaulted essentially a naval individual, a naval officer, with a table, a chair, and a door, because it was debris from the ship. And so he just grabbed it as a weapon because he didn't have his weapon on him.
Mm-hmm.
So hitting someone with a door makes sense, but
I don't know about
if you look
salting
at
it,
an extreme case there, that might be like waterlogged door, so it could have sea salt in it maybe, but I mean, it's not really something that you think about unless you're dealing with something like, I would say, like a zombie, like like undead. If you throw salt on a zombie in D&D, technically lore would state they would catch a blaze in a blue fire, but it wouldn't cause any damage, just a visual effect. It's a way for people to test to see if something is undead by throwing salt at them.
I just wanted to check.
I did not know about that zombie thing. That's interesting.
Hey, there's a lot of hidden things in D&D that a lot of people don't know.
Yeah. If, I'll be honest, I read the D&D memes Reddit, and it is so fucking awful. I hate my life sometimes reading some of the shit I see on there. But every once in a while, they're not bad. And you actually get an explanation of an obscure rule you didn't know about.
Yeah, to some degree. As you should always remember, as it states in the Dungeon Master's Guide, which is one of the 3 books you talked about earlier, all rules are subject to change via the DM. DM has ultimate say.
Yeah. So, for example, the official rules state that you can only take 20d6 damage from falling maximum. If the DM says, no, that's stupid, you take over 1,000 damage if you fall from space, then there you go.
I would sit there and say, if you're going over what 20d6 would be 200 feet, if you're falling over 200 feet, there would be no reason to honestly roll any dice.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect a raging barbarian to even stay raging at that point, because throwing logic into it, maximum velocity would dictate that it would take more than 6 seconds probably to fall more than 200 feet. And then if you haven't hit anything or nothing's hitting you, you lose rage, you hit the ground, you're taking force damage, which you're not immune to or resistant against anyway.
I thought it was bludgeoning damage.
No, it's force damage. Fall damage is labeled as force to get around that aspect of the earth isn't attempting to hit you. You are colliding with it in a fashion that you can't avoid.
Interesting. Okay. I'll need to remember that ruling next time somebody asks me an example of force damage besides Eldritch Blast, because that's the only one I fucking remember.
Think of it as a blatant way of stating kinetic energy.
Mm-hmm.
There are dragons that existed in previous editions of Dungeons and Dragons that actually had a force breath.
Oh no, they do in this edition as well.
If they added them since the last book I fucking bought, which was a little while ago, because I've been moving digital instead of physical.
Yeah, in Fabian something of dragons, they added gem dragons, and I don't remember which gem, but one of them has a fourth breath weapon.
Yeah, it's just an intense weight, like whenever you watch anime or like movies where they show gravity. It's essentially what gravity would do to something. That would be like saying that punching somebody, if they make the argument of that, would be if punching somebody does bludgeoning damage, it's no different than from a gravity well spell where they crush something with force. It's the difference between something else that would take damage that can only truthfully reach a certain point to something that is a mechanical force of nature.
Okay, you've lost me.
Sorry, let me dumb it down. Gravity does different damage than a fist.
Yes.
Fist cannot equal gravity. There's your difference.
But they can still do the same amount of damage. That's the confusing part.
Oh yeah, but if you think of it at a different scale, gravity can do much more than bludgeoning. At a certain point, you begin to look at it, is it bludgeoning if I throw a planet at you?
That's just fucking obliterating someone.
Yeah, that is using something. That would be something along the lines of force, because at a certain point, it's an unfathomable kind of difference. It becomes a force of nature, like how lightning and all these other things. As soon as something is no longer, let's say,
it becomes a force.
Yeah, when something's no longer in control of a living thing, it's force.
Gotcha.
Traps can still be bludgeoning because they were designed to impact. A spell like Gravity Well is force, because technically, if it wasn't because of the magic, that black hole you just made wouldn't dissipate.
Okay, yeah. I think that makes sense to me, at least.
That's why something can be immune to bludgeoning, but not resistant to force.
Someone can be... There's things that are immune to bludgeoning damage?
Yeah, so there's a creature called the Helmed Horror that I do believe from its stats is immune to force damage. And that's mostly because a lot of base cantrips that spellcasters can use force to get over resistances and whatnot. Since this creature is a construct designed to battle mages, it is immune to these forms of damage. However, it is only resistant to non-magical bludgeoning damage.
Say a hammer.
Yeah. But if that hammer was enchanted, it would do full damage.
So real quick, well, not real quick, but next thing, Archlord. When you DM, do you DM from modules or homebrew? You said homebrew, right?
I do homebrew, and I've been running one for 2 years now.
Okay. When you first started, did you, were your very first experience with D&D, were you a player or a DM?
My very first experience was I ended up having to pay to play. I went to an Adventurers League.
Wait, Adventurers League doesn't make you pay?
The one that was run in the town nearby did. It wasn't like the official one, but it was set up the same way.
Gotcha, okay.
I ended up playing. I recall it distinctly. We started as level 3. I was a necromancer wizard, and the backstory for the character was it was a cloning spell gone wrong, and I came out a child. And so I was like a 90-year-old man inside the body of like a 13-year-old. And that was my first experience actually playing D&D, because I was like, I'm gonna go for a weird character concept and play it, because I'd researched it up to that point, and then me and my brother went out and played. He was a dwarf fighter.
Okay. And then when you started DMing, you said you didn't like modules, so you started a homebrew world. Did you pull from existing lore and things then, I assume?
When I was in middle school and high school, me and a bunch of friends, essentially, that was during the time of machinima, like the game stories and roleplay stuff. We did that. I just kind of took all my memories from those stories and turned it into essentially a book, and then that into a campaign setting.
Interesting.
Though it would be untrue if I said I've never run a module. The day in which my brother passed away was the day in which I started DMing. It was the day I told myself I will always play D&D at least once a week. Because that was the last thing him and I ever did together, and we were bonding over Dungeons & Dragons, and so it's essentially just become this small homage to him. It's just to play.
Gotcha.
And
that's
we did
very
Minds
sweet.
of
That's
Fendelver.
awesome.
That was the one I started DMing, and then here in the last of the earlier part of this year, we finished Minds of Fendelver, that module, and moved to Curse of Strahd. I'm no longer DMing, as I am now a player in that. But I've after like the first quarter of Minds of Fendelver, I did not DM since then. I had another friend of mine who we play IRL picked that up, and like he would go to work having read and recorded himself reading the module, and would listen to it while he was at work so he could memorize every aspect of the module. I'm like, well, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. Holy shit.
Yeah, and so he did the same thing for Curse of Strahd, which we're playing through. So
yeah, you guys like living with my dad? I do too.
I mean, that was kind of random, but
I don't know what he's doing. Let's just ignore him.
sounds great.
It's those. It's him playing Call of Duty.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Just died.
Yeah,
to
yeah,
1v1.
get a 9-year-old.
Yeah, he does. Either way, you were saying, what were you saying, Arch?
Oh, we finished that topic about me doing Dungeons
Okay.
and Dragons and stuff. So if you got more questions,
Can I
Yeah.
run something by you?
sure.
A good friend of mine, my fishing partner actually, plays D&D IRL. And the DM for his campaign forgot to check his stuff and gave him enough stuff to make his base damage 5,000 and his base health 300.
I don't understand how that would be possible. Are you talking about 5th edition?
I think so. I don't know which edition it is.
I don't think 5,000 would be a plausible thing unless what they're doing is like chain teleporting somebody into the air and then dropping them from space. But I can't fathom a way that would be possible unless they themselves are like turned into a winged Tarrasque or some shit like that. I don't know. Which honestly can't be done.
Apparently he has skills that allow him to... Because I saw his D&D Beyond character sheet. Because they made a D&D Beyond, but they play IRL. And I saw his character sheet, and like his base movement is like 75 feet.
Wow.
Base movement 75. I would say that's an improbability unless what they're doing in that campaign is heavily influenced with magic and homebrew stuff, Then again, at that point, I can't tell you how the hell they would have done it. It would have had to have come from the terrible discretion of an what I would label an unexperienced DM. That sounds like a shenanigans campaign and not something that was meant to be forever long term.
No, from what I understand, it's been a long-term thing, and the DM never expected him to actually become this OP. It was purely by mistake.
Then again, it's the inexperience of a DM. You don't. I've made those kinds of mistakes in the past. My first homebrew campaign that I ran, which is a variation of the one that I stream, I ended up having the first big boss encounter, or they called him a big boss, but to me at the time, he was like small fry. They went into a town, and when all was said and done, they ended up fighting this man who was essentially themed after the circus and cast black hole over the town. And so things that at a certain weight were getting lifted into the sky, and I had a goblin player, and I've had a few other lighter raced characters in that campaign setting that were slowly drifting into the air. And so I've seen the end where I've had to see the aspects of unexperienced DMing and players that are too much driven to try to combat that kind of activity. And it's changed since, but it's gone from that whole idea of this trying to one-up each other to something more reliable.
You said black hole. I got bad flashbacks of the very first time I ever played D&D.
All right, there's a story here.
Oh yeah, it's a story, all right. So it was supposed to be a one session before our actual DM came in and to take the reins. I mean, it wasn't supposed to be a huge long one. It was supposed to be like a one session done thing. So it was just a simple move forward through the town and come up to a castle and then fight a giant. Well, the giant had a spell, I think it was called Black Hole or something. But one of my party members had the grand idea of shoving all 6 of us into a bag of holding. Then the giant cast a black hole on it and sent us, to the future. We were all inside the bag of holding.
I don't think that's how time travel works.
Nor is that how a bag of holding works.
Yeah.
I would assume all 6 of you would overfill a bag of holding to some degree. And then you'd have to begin to realize that for one person to go into a bag of holding, it's like 5 minutes of air. For 6 people, that's definitely much less. So yeah. Then you have to put in the variation of height, weight, whatever, blah. And then all the clutter that's already in the bag of holding. Throwing into the future, sure. Nobody knows what the fuck a black hole does. We can't see into there yet, so.
I mean, it was one of those
for me to judge him.
It was like one of those spells things and like I said, it was a one-off session, so I mean, it was like anything could have happened, and it would have been logical enough.
Yeah. I mean, if you put a bag of holding inside another bag of holding, it creates a black hole, sucks an area of 30 feet in diameter into the astral sea, and they're lost there forever. So, I mean, that's a thing.
But yeah, no, it was something, because I was a halfling who spoke in the third person. and I was like 3 feet tall.
At least you remember your first session well.
Oh man, just barely out of range.
I think my first time playing my first time playing D&D, I don't remember much because it was actually 3.5e, or maybe it was Pathfinder. It was either 3.5e or Pathfinder. And I played a druid. I don't even remember which race I was, and I was told to stop endangering my animal companion because that's not what a druid would do. So we basically came up to like this door that had these like fangs on it, and it wouldn't open. So I just like took my eagle and just poked him with one of the fangs, and the door opened. That's like all I remember about my first time playing D&D.
No, I was a halfling rogue who spoke in the third person.
Yeah. Much more interesting than my character. Because I didn't care about the role-playing at first, I just wanted to play the game.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what puts a lot of people off from D&D, is the actual role-playing itself.
Well,
the roleplay's
no.
fun.
There's
So I thought that was the selling point for me.
There are many different types of players of Dungeons & Dragons. There's those that sit there and think of it more like a tabletop game instead of a tabletop RPG. Which it is a tabletop RPG, which is what it's marketed as, but a lot of people will sit there and go, well, let's do modules. You know, don't have to think a lot about the background. You already have something planned out, and the way it works is you move towards danger if you want or not. Homebrews tend either to sway to one or the other, sometimes in extremes, where there could just be an arena, one shot, or homebrew, where every session you're fighting. Or there could be one kind of like mine, where there are long stints where you're walking, having to talk with other players or NPCs, things like that. Me as a DM, I prefer the roleplay aspect because it means I have less work. I could literally show up, start the session, remind them where we left off, and then sit there and never have to actually do anything. I've had players have a 3-hour conversation at the during our session, and so there's a lot that goes on in that. Some players prefer the role play. Some players prefer the combat, but most like the balance. They want the risk with the reward, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the role play. I like the role play more, but I don't want to have a full role play campaign. I want to have like role play and then like with combat.
Yeah, personally, I like the combat more, and that's definitely what draws me into D&D. It's the ability to problem solve in a fight and be able to improvise pretty much anything that draws me.
And the only aspect is that 5th edition, well, D&D isn't built to be constant combat unless your DM is like, well, at the end of every combat session, all your spell slots and whatnot are they all come back or whatever. It's built systematically to have it to where you'll have a minimum or a maximum of like 1 to 3 combats a day, depending on your level. At level 1 or level 1 to level 5, you're praying for only 1 combat, because beyond that, you're not surviving. Not unless your DM is one that's handing out health potions or giving you just hordes of weak monsters, things like that. Then at that point, it's just more of like the feeling of playing a wave kind of style combat system. I prefer the aspect of, sure, we'll have one session that's mostly combat, the next session some combat RP, and we'll probably have a couple RP sessions and then go back in towards the combat. And that's how I like to do it, is that you can't just have constant combat, because then you have to think that your players are gonna forget how many spell slots they have, or they're gonna need to Remember all these other aspects, because most players are too busy during the week to communicate with each other or to keep in their head what's going on in that session. And then let's say the unfortunate happens, which is very common in D&D or for tabletop RPGs, is a session gets canceled. Now you've gone from waiting to come back for 7 days to now 14 days. How much of that are you actually going to remember? My Curse of Strahd campaign that I'm a player in hasn't actually sat down at the table in like 1 to 2 months. So it's one of those things where it becomes an issue if it's just combat. Role play is that aspect where you can pick up or drop it wherever if you have that understanding of like, all right, this is what happened. It gives the player time afterwards to sort through feelings or whatever and be fine with it. The aspect of trying to keep it balanced is the thing that DMs find hard. So that's where you'll find one DM that sways one side or one towards the other. There's never a true middle. That's more of a preference, really.
So have you ever run a campaign where you're mostly doing roleplay throughout it, then like when you're nearing the end of it, it's just lots of weak monsters after another for like a wave type style, then you fight the big bad guy?
None of my players has actually ever gotten to a point to doing an honest big bad that had an army beforehand or whatever. Though I've played modules. Modules are somewhat like that, where you're given the ability to sleep in dungeons and things, which to me logically doesn't make sense, but the module just allows it. I'm like, if 8 hours are passing and you know that your front guard hasn't reported back in during shift change, then you should probably be aware that something's wrong. But I mean, that's me. So me as a DM, I've not done that. I think session 1 for the current campaign I've been DMing, they fought in a bar in the immediate surrounding area. Session 2, they went in and snuck into a place which was extremely high tension. Session 3, they ended up confronting the boss of the essentially the gang, and then promptly got their ass beat. And then were kicked out of a city. That was like the start of my campaign. It was like, yeah, welcome, get out. That was essentially how it was, and it kind of pushed them towards other directions in the campaign, other than dealing with the area in which they started it. I like to think of it like, a living world will have areas that are going to have people in charge. That it wouldn't make sense if you were a group of level 3 adventurers, even if there are about 7 of you, able to go in there and then just beat that man's ass and walk away. It's like, why would that guy be a threat then? Why would he control so many other people if they could just gang up on him and beat him down? So I think of it in that regard.
You think of it as like a logical fantasy type style thing?
Yeah, I like the aspect where the players can sit there and go, that's reasonable. You know, I could see that actually happening. If some guy named Tom, who used to be a farmer, is now a level 10 fighter or something, essentially, and has a dragon as a pet, and you're able to beat his ass but not his pet, how the fuck did he get the pet? Those are those kinds of aspects where it's like, why? Or if there's 30 guys out there, and either there's not a real leader to this bandit group, they're just a bandit group that doesn't have an actual organization. That makes sense, because bandits would either choose the guy that's ever so slightly stronger than everyone else, but would know if all of us ganged up on him, we can kick his ass. But we don't really want to, because I don't want to be the one guy that dies. But if you're talking about like a fucking army, like waves, like 30, 40 plus at a time in a dungeon, you're talking about a guy that can either cast Disintegrate at will, like a Lich, or high powerful or powerful mages, or you're talking about a barbarian that can swing a great axe and cleave two people in half in a single moment. You know, it has to be the problems that they face going to the boss have to be just under the equivalency of fighting said boss. And that
you gotta have a logical answer to beat the boss.
Yeah, because no player wants to go through essentially a maze of minions and have a harder time doing that than fighting the boss, because it's like, wow, this guy was a pushover the entire time, and that's the feeling it's like, wow, or unexcitement. If it's exciting the entire time or you're having fun, a DM's secret, honestly, some enemies that you fight don't have HP pools or bars or anything. We just sit there and go, before that moment, we try to judge before it's no longer fun. That's when we kind of we try to kill off that creature or the enemy, because we want to make sure that it feels on par with everybody. You get cooler shit to do, and all those other creatures that you fought previously, like let's say you've raided an orc, a band of orcs or something like that, and you had a hard time. You've leveled up 5 levels since then. You go back there. I'm not gonna just make them up to your level. There's either gonna be the same amount of orcs or slightly more. You're gonna wipe the floor because you've had that experience.
Stronger.
Yeah, it's that aspect of being able to realize that growth, but know that there are still entities out there equivalent to your power or more.
That reminds me of a time I was playing with Raven, when Raven was a DM. He had to sneak into this vampire's like castle type thing in the frozen tundra. We were no match for the vampire. But we didn't have to fight the vampire, but because we weren't that smart about it, we ended up having to fight him. The only logical solution at that point was run away.
Yeah, to go more in depth, one of they were there to rescue a person who was turned into a thrall, and there was like a slave trading ring with the vampire, where they would kidnap people, and then basically the vampire would feed on them and keep them as, slaves or kill them or whatever. And when they went to this like abandoned castle, there was some spiders on the top and stuff, and they got through all that. There was some I forget what their names are, but werebats, I think they're called. There was a werebat that was like really scared of the players and would just like run away as soon as he saw them. But then they went down into the basement and set a casket on fire as soon as they saw a casket. And then the vampire walked through the wall and is like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And then promptly almost killed all of them.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
We thought lighting the casket on fire would kill whatever was inside.
And it wasn't inside at all.
Fighter ended up grappling the vampire for control while the rest of the party ran away. And I ended up getting mind controlled, and I had to sneak away from him. He was busy chasing the other players.
Yeah.
Sounds like typical D&D.
Yeah, they're very tough.
I forget what level they were at the time. I want to say level 7 or level 6. Like yeah, like level 6 or 7.
My players at level 5, there was about 7 of them, defeated, I think it was an adult dragon.
Oh, yeah.
Especially we had one of those too. We died.
Yeah. Dragons, honestly, depending on some aspects and how you rule things, they're not that hard to beat. Me, I wanted to make sure that it was the sense of a dragon that wasn't experienced. It was a pet to an enemy that they were not meant to fight that enemy. They were just meant to fight the pet and witness the enemy kill another NPC. And so like that went over great. They had a great RP session. My whole goal as a DM is to either make my players have feelings like be happy, laugh, get pissed, or whatever, or cry. I greatly enjoy the crying because it tells me. Like Spaz is one of my players that I stream on Saturdays, and I've made him cry like 6 times in this campaign.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've made another player cry roughly the same amount. 2 more at one point, and then I think the only one has not had truthfully any kind of like sadness or negative emotions other than anger and laughing and having fun. There was another one that I did. I ended up killing. It was like a triple entente, essentially, where he came up with a backstory for his character, had a character, and his character's backstory was influenced by his father's character, and I promptly murdered his father's character in front of his character, and gave that kind of same kind of dying moments aspect, and I ended up touching on like a real life moment that he had with his father as his father passed away. And I was like, I made you have feelings inadvertently, but I don't honestly feel bad. The moment was great.
That's pretty cool that you tried to do that.
Yeah, I let players. I love homebrew for the fact that players can influence the world with their backstory, and that's kind of the reward I give players. It's like, I don't care how long your backstory is, I'll read it, and if I like it, I'm throwing some of that into the world. We have one character who was like, I want to be a vampire, and I was like, all right, well, vampires are not liked in this world, so they're Dampier. And they're like, well, I want to have the background noble and whatnot. And I went over an aspect of the setting where there are vampires that were nobles that started a war and then were promptly slaughtered at the very end of the war. They wanted to be a descendant from those vampires and still be that whole aspect. And then that slowly turned into a small whole story arc that they're on the verge of stepping into, and they're getting bits and pieces for it. The other character whose father died in front of them is trying to end a war that's happening in their homeland. And another character, we have all these other ones that are like deeply woven, and then one character who is a satyr druid that is like, I woke up in the forest one day and I've made it work. And I've taken things that they didn't want to write and I've woven it into the story to some degree, or their character, because the aspect of having a story is that you need to feel a connection to it. If you're not involved truthfully into any aspect of it, you're not really going to be interested in seeing its resolution. And so I can't expect my players to sit there and play for 7 to 8 hours every Saturday evening if there's nothing in it for them, if they don't feel the drive to.
One of the things that I had in my bird fighter backstory was that he was part of his village of like bird people were attacked by elementals, and he was one of the very last surviving few people of his tribe. He basically was wanting to hunt down the elemental master who murdered his village.
And as a very inexperienced DM, I did not read that backstory because I don't think he ever wrote it down.
Oh, I think I did.
I don't remember.
Okay.
It's okay, yeah. It's past. I apologize. I'm not a good DM, I'm still learning.
It takes time. Even
Yeah.
I'm just still learning, and it's been 2.5 years.
Yeah. Actually, it's really funny, by the way, you mentioned you have a Drampire Noble, because I also have a Drampire Noble. What are the odds? My guy, I asked him basically, okay, you want to be a Drampire, but I read the lore that basically Drampires are half vampire, so okay, what's your other half? And he's like, okay, I'll be a Drow. So he's a Drow Drampire Noble, and I basically created the entire Underdark just for his character. And now they're like all the parties trying to help him do this thing. I don't want to get into it because Monkey plays in my campaign, but basically there's a curse on the family where they can't leave the house for more than like 3 months at a time, otherwise they meet a terrible fate. And they're trying to lift the curse, and then I don't know why, but they decided it would be a good idea to let the character get married, so now he also has the curse on him.
Ah.
So, yeah. And then, like, my only problem with it is that I'm telling my guys, like, yeah, you guys are in the Underdark trying to do this. Everyone else's story is basically just on hold right now while we deal with this, because I expected it to be done already. So I'm like, I'm making it up as I go, which, you know, most DMs do, so.
That's fair.
But no, I feel really bad for my players, and that's not something I know how to really fix, is to get them more invested in the story. Because they've expressed multiple times they just want to leave his ass. And I'm like, come on guys, you're playing D&D, you gotta be a party. The player wants to play, you guys like the guy, we can't kick him out of the party and make him make a new character or anything.
Yeah, that's the hard aspect behind it. I've unfortunately had a player have to leave IRL reasons. They ended up getting a job that works them on Saturdays. And, you know, as a DM, real life always takes place. You know, this is a hobby. This is for fun. But we ended up having to have them leave the campaign setting. And that's what happened the last session. It was their departure. And at this point, we've had 2 players end up leaving. And I replaced one of them. And an aspect for a DM, if you always need to talk to the player, see if they're comfortable with how the story is going. If they're like, I don't want to give up yet, you have to find some reason for things to still work, a drive. If I will tell you this from another player standpoint, if a situation doesn't have an answer, an adventurer or a character that slightly knows that character to some degree isn't going to feel obligated to do anything unless they themselves are like a paladin or they've taken an oath to actually do something. For a hint towards that, I would just say drive or weave them together to some degree. What's going on with that character's backstory or that curse, drive it into the main story somehow. Make it relevant.
You wouldn't fucking believe I tried to do that, and they fucking ignored it.
Then you just have a bunch of players that want to go out and do crab fishing.
Yeah, exactly.
And at that point, let them do that. And then have the world burn down, and then the oceans run dry, and then stranded out in the middle of the desert. That is now that used to be the ocean.
Yeah.
You know? But if you have players like that, it's calls for a change of seats, and that's all it is.
Yeah.
There's a certain point at a DM that you need to realize that you've done all you can, you've shown the signs, and if they walk away or walk through, you know, the danger zone, that's when you just kind of that's when you can sit there and go, all right, that's your guys' story. You either live happily ever after, being farmers, doing whatever, or playing adventurer, but there's always that underlining story a DM is trying to put out, because you are there as a storyteller, and if they're not wanting to hear the story, then your job there is done, and they get to decide what they do from that point on.
But it does make me feel bad as the storyteller that they don't care about my story, because that means I'm probably telling a bad story, usually.
Well, that's not entirely the case. Let's be honest here. I'm not a big fan of Harry Potter, yet it sold millions, almost probably billions of copies at this point, just in all the books together. I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not going to sit down and buy the book and read it or go and rewatch the movies, but others will. It just means that the story you made wasn't for them. And either you bite the bullet, make a new story, or they bite the bullet and find a different DM that has the story that they're looking for.
Yeah.
Either way, there's no point of damaging emotions or stressing out if no one at the table walks away feeling happy.
Yeah.
And that as a DM, that should be your primary goal. Do I feel happy with what that session was? Do my players feel happy with what that session was? If they don't, is there something I can do? And if you have done all you can, or you can't think of anything else, then that means the story needs to change. You need to sit down and go over it realistically. I've had that before. I've had a player sit down with me after one session and just looked at me. It's like, every time I walk away from this table, I'm just stressed. I'm like, okay. And I changed something, and they're like, okay, this is better. Those are those moments where you have to sit there and realize either a slight tweak, a change here and there, but if you have nothing left that you can tweak or change, then change the story or change the players. I've had, in my entire time as DMing, let me actually count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've had 8 players walk away from my table before. Not all at once, but over my entire time. I remember who they were. I remember their characters, but I did what I could for them. I even away from the table, even gave them pep talks like, you're doing a okay job. Don't feel stressed out. You know, your character's doing fine. You're doing fine. You're playing well. And I've had players still walk away. That's just how it is. It's a tabletop RPG. It's not like you can shackle everyone to some sort of concrete floor and put them around a table. I go, all right, we're playing for the next 12 hours, and you're gonna like it.
I mean, you can.
At that point, it's more Dungeons than Dragons.
Yeah.
And if you had that, please tell me where that is so I can actually go and have a good session for once.
Yeah, same.
I have a question since I have 2 DMs in this VC. How often does it happen where you plan something for a session and then the group completely go off trail?
I would say 1 every 10 sessions.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Let me go with will be a good example. Okay, here we go. Prime example. It was a starter module. I was a player. I was not a DM myself, but this is a prime example. It was a module about the like something peaks. Had a
Ice
white
Spire?
dragon. Icefire Peaks. There it is. Yeah, that's what it is. Icefire Peaks. And as we were informed later by the DM, it's a role. But the whole premise of this this module is that your adventures start in an inn at this certain town. I think it was the same town of Fandelver, right at the base of Icefire Peaks, the mountains. And you roll every day that during the campaign to see what the dragon, which is the big boss, what they're doing. They can either be fucked off somewhere, they could be in the forest, they could be flying over the town, or agonizing the town. Right? These are just random things. It's out of a dice. And we ended up having the DM rolled, and apparently the dragon was supposed to terrorize the town. Day 1. Session 1. We're all level 2, I believe. And we had one player who was like, all right, I'm gonna save the town. walked out the fucking tavern, fired a spell at the dragon. It hit the dragon, did 3 damage. That number's important. Did 3 damage. And they fled back into the tavern. Dragon comes down, stops in front of the door, and frost breaths the entire interior of the tavern, instantly killing the player.
Nice.
I mean,
My
yeah.
character was not downstairs, as they were upstairs, unable to do anything. The player had a combat companion, which promptly proceeded to try to chase down the dragon, which they were able to grab onto as the dragon flew up into the air, and did a barrel, like a spin, and dropped the combat companion. The combat companion was able to do 5 damage to it while grappled onto the dragon, but promptly, to the player's dismay and anger, shed their clothes mid-flight, pissed and shit themselves as they fell to their death. They were very angry with the session that day. But such is the case for some people. We ended up finding out that if we would have attacked the dragon, all we needed to do was 5 points of damage to cause it to fly away or flee.
Amazing.
They did 3, and they died because they didn't do 5 damage. The DM sat there and was like, this isn't what I planned today. And so that was a good way of sitting there and going, session 1 is a great way to have everything go off the rails. I, as a DM, had a moment in which I essentially did the same thing. What? Funny enough, that same player was the cause for this this incident as well, as there was a massive rock. If you've played D&D, just think of it as like
Giant bird.
Yeah, massive bird, like what are those fucking bird Pokemon things are, but massive, fucking huge.
It looks like fear.
Flying. Yeah, but flying overhead, and it had a small platoon of people, or like a squad of people on it, as they were flying overhead.
Sense.
And yeah, because these are big birds, they can carry people. And they were going from one place to another, and the players were down on the ground in a place called Glinter Hill. And they looked up and saw the bird, and one player was like, is extremely paranoid, and shot at the fucking bird. That was roughly like 500 feet up. They used the longbow and shot up at it, and lucky enough struck it. Unlucky enough, the bird cared enough to decide that they needed to be dealt with. They were level 3. The challenge rating for that bird, I believe, is like 10 to 12. Which means a party that attacks that bird is recommended to be at least 3 levels lower than that, or that level minus the number of people. So there was 5 of them. They were level 3. Their recommended level that they should have been would have been roughly 7. They were not prepared for it as it dropped down, and I was like, I don't know how else to do this. So I threw like 2 helmed horrors at them as they promptly fled, and I had the border guard for the kingdom that they were in defend the rest. It was like that was my only way of being able to save them. It's like they would have just instantly died session 3. And it would have been a TPK. Because one player was like, I'm just going to shoot at this, when it was supposed to be like, oh, look, it's a little story element flying by. Nice, that might be something in the future. Nah, I'm going to shoot it.
Now that I think about it, I think lighting the coffin on fire was my idea.
No, it was Jason's.
You're going to have players that are like, my whole goal here is because I'm paranoid. Or the idea that the DM puts stuff in to deal with. It's like, yeah, sure. Going and meeting the king. Yeah, you could definitely kill the king. Are you getting out of the kingdom, though? That's a different question. Or, yeah, I'll let you go into that massive cave that you saw that dragon go into. Sure. I can't stop you.
I mean, we saw the coffin. We were immediately like, oh, vampire. fire is strong against vampire. Light coffin on fire, kill vampire.
Oh, look at that chalk.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, my first session with that necromancer wizard I stated before, first time I played D&D, I lit a mansion on fire. There were vampires in there, and I was like, "Yeah, I ain't dealing with this. I'm not a high enough level." As I began to flee, I just cast fire cantrips at the ground and at furniture and tables and shit, and burnt down the mansion.
Light flames on fire. Fire strong against vampires. Kill the vampires with fire.
Well, as I learned as a DM, fire doesn't really change anything in regards to a vampire. That's just mythology.
Yep.
But as a player at that point, I was like, nah, I know fire does continuous damage if somebody's standing in it. Light the place on fire. I'm leaving. I don't care, because outside the sun is there. The building will collapse and vampires will disintegrate. That was the plan.
That's a solid plan. That's a solid plan.
However, we end the session, and my character's back at the Avenging Guild, air quotes. And the individual that was there that was supposed to help us is just covered, charred, burnt, and just covered in soot. And I was like, whose smart idea was it to light the place on fire while I was still in there? And I raised my hand. I was like, yeah, fuck you. I'm a level 12. All right, I'm still like a level 3. You deal with it. Like, oh, that meant nothing to you. It meant everything to me.
Yeah.
It's a proper plan, but like
It's horrible
you
execution.
Yeah. For you guys, I would have like put an arcane glyph on the on it. Like if I was a spellcaster, glyph that if something were to enter into the coffin, that being the trigger, it would cast fireball. And just do that. Main reason with that is that if you ever did go fight the vampire or something later on and were in a situation where you were able to succeed, they would disappear and go to their coffin to regenerate. And once they got into their coffin, they would detonate and die. You just let him walk to his death.
And no, we took a torch and just threw it at the coffin.
Yeah. I mean, even then, that would not have worked because a vampire's coffin is magical. Fire won't destroy magical objects, but a spell would.
It was a solid plan.
Yeah, it was.
We
We
all agreed to it.
It had an aspect behind it, but it was poor choice.
Action.
If you were fighting a zombie or, let's say, like just a regular form of living dead, then maybe I'd see how that would actually be plausible. But I also think people think differently than everyone else, so I can't really fault anybody for not thinking like, this aspect compared to that aspect. That's where vampires and common mythological creatures kind of are able to get away from players very easily because they have like, I'm gonna wear garlic around my neck. Bitch, that means nothing. He brought his EpiPen today.
I'm gonna light his coffin on fire. Yeah, that's not gonna do anything.
Yeah.
We learned that pretty quick when we had to run away from the vampire. It about murdered all of us.
Yeah. I don't mean to cut you guys short here, but because of my situation, I would like to end the podcast soon. So if you guys have any last minute things you want to talk about, please do so now.
As a D&D player, and I guess since this is that, for anybody out there looking for DMs, you can pretty much find them anywhere. Players are easier to find, but always remember that when you sit down to play, it's about the fun. Don't get stressed. Many players do that, and it ruins the entire experience. Help your DM. Be creative with your character, but work with them with the backstory. If you're playing modules, sit down and be prepared for somebody to not be prepared, because most DMs might have the cheat sheet in front of them. They've lacked the time to read it. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, and can you also shout out you said you stream your D&D group, right?
Oh yeah. We stream here on Twitch every Saturday, 6 Central, 7 Eastern, roughly 6 to 7 hours, sometimes 8, at Team Epic Productions. We have a YouTube as well, which all of our older videos are on. All technically, some of them have been lost thanks to technical difficulties, but that's where you can find us. It's pretty specific of a name, so.
Yeah, and then do you
That
have
sounds actually familiar, actually. I've heard of it from somewhere else.
well, they're in the promotions channel on this Discord, so that's how I know of them.
Yeah, that and I know that at one point you guys may have interacted with Luna, who I refer to as Boss. She's the glue that makes everything run and work and stick together.
It depends which Luna. I know multiple Lunas.
Luna Neko Ninja.
I don't know. Not myself, I don't think.
Monkey knows her.
But I do believe at one point you guys, I think, rated us over at Team Epic. Like, it was months back.
Yeah.
I think it was like a while ago.
We typically only stream on Wednesdays. That would be why. But we may have done a Saturday stream then.
No, it was probably Wednesday because we do talks like Q&As on Wednesday about the previous couple sessions.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Maybe we did raid you on a Wednesday then.
Spaz is the host for that thing, so.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely check it out now. I didn't know that was you guys. I figured that was like some random people I've never heard of before.
Yeah, we are random people you've never really heard of before.
Oh no, I've heard of you now, so that's what matters. And so will
I might
zero
actually tune in on
listeners.
Saturday.
Yeah, all of our 1 listeners definitely have now heard of you. We'll definitely check you out if they have time.
Hey, that's
sure.
fair. You know, as it is, 1 is 1, and
Yep.
it adds up.
Yep.
And hopefully we'll end up throwing you guys a shout out. I'll try to put something on Twitter for me being here. I was so unprepared today. I literally left a session, made an excuse for my character to dip out just after combat too. So I do a lot of D&D.
Yeah, Giraffe Waifu is just starting a new campaign, if you know her. And,
no, I do not.
Okay, yeah. She's a mother, and she has 2 kids, and she's a VTuber. And she is planning on starting, but not streaming it. And we got 14 players between everyone. So she's DMing 2 groups now. And we decided to do Lost Mine of... I always forget the fucking P word.
Vendelver.
And then after that, we were going to do Rime of the Frost Maiden. Or not Rime of the... Thunder King Storm. Something like that. Storm King's Thunder. That's what it's called.
Yeah, the giant campaign.
Yeah. So, if any of you want to check out any of our stuff, do join the Twitch channel, and then do ! Discord, 18 plus if you want to join the Discord, ! Twitter, ! YouTube. And if you are in the YouTube channel, check the description. I always put the links in the description to everything, and I will also link, excuse me, Arch, I have to ask, what is the name of it again?
Team Epic Productions. Let me get that for you real quick.
Yes, thank you.
It is a mouthful.
And if any of you guys want to check out any of that, go ahead. Who do you want to raid, Arch, since you're today's guest?
Oh, jeez. I have no idea. Let me see
Okay,
here.
if you want, I can pick someone too, but...
I see that you guys, a lot of your art seems probably themed after Payday, but
nope.
Chachi is doing Payday 2.
Okay, yeah, we know Chachi. We can raid Chachi.
Yeah, go raid Chachi.
Okay.
Chachi always raids us on a Saturday.
Hell yeah. Okay, it's /raid Chachi VTuber. There we go. And you guys, if you are joining in the raid, please say NTR raid. If you have our emote, please use our emote. If not, just use any kind of love or anything like that. NTR raid. There you go. And everyone, please enjoy your week, and we'll be here next week. Yeah. Goodbye, everyone.
Yeah.